Estás escuchando Radio Kickapoo desde Musquis, Coahuila.
Welcome to Radio Kickapoo. I'm your host, your friend Ariel Rodriguez Suki. A lot of people have been asking, where did the Kickapoo tribe come from? Well, let me just tell you right off the bat, they've been here long before you did. I'm just kidding, that was a serious joke. I think the more important question is, why are the Kickapoo tribe located in 4 different places today? Which are in the states of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Coahuila, Mexico. To find out the answer to this question, I've invited a good friend of mine. Let me just tell you that his sources of investigations are spectacular, mind blowing, and documented. Let him introduce himself. How you doing, my friend? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Kent Collier. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm currently working with the Kickapoo traditional tribe of Texas in Eagle Pass, and I do come down to Mexico on occasions. And I've been working with the tribe off and on with the Oklahoma Kickapoo tribe since 1989. So I have done research on the Kickapoo, and I'll be glad to talk about some of the questions you've asked today and give a little bit about Kickapoo history.
You know, I think it is very important to find out the answer to this question. Kent, well, let's start it off. Should I ask a different question like, when did the Kickapoo tribe made its first contact with the Europeans? That is documented.
First, let me kind of give a disclaimer that what I'm going to present today is history that's found in Kickapoo books, that's produced by mainly academics and other people, news clippings from newspapers, those type of things, museums, facts, right? Yeah. The Kickapoo may have a little different variation on Kickapoo history, and it's a different history than there. And so I'm not really going to address what the Kickapoo think. I'm just going to use the facts, or that's the evidence. I'm going to use the facts that's in the history books and docudramas and newspaper clippings.
Awesome, Ken. This is awesome. We are going to travel back into time when there was no motor vehicles. It was tough back in those days. There was a lot of horseback riding, walking. There was battles, wars, and all that stuff. Let's get into action. Kent, we'll start off with that action.
Right. Like I said, the history I'm going to present is history that's more documented and has been documented in books and videos and those type of things. Kickapoo history goes back long before that, from time immemorial. And like I said, it's the Kickapoo history, and it's their history, and I'm not really going to address that history today. I'm just going to talk what's out there in the public domain. But the first question I think you asked was when the Kickapoo first had contact with the Europeans.
Yes, that's correct, Ken.
The first contact, the first contact with the Europeans occurred in 1667. The French were aware of the Kickapoo being in what is now the state of Wisconsin and southwest Wisconsin and the Great Lakes area. But they actually didn't have contact or make real contact with the Kickapoo until 1667. And with that contact, the Kickapoo and the French entered into like fur trade and some trade between the two. And that's how the Kickapoo got to know the French and become aligned with the French because at that time, you got to remember, from 1667 into the 1700s, the French and the British were competing for control of the larger part of North America, what is now today the United States and Canada. And the Kickapoo were aligned with the French, and they were aligned with other tribes, mainly against the British, and then later on against the Americans.
Wow, Ken, keep going, Ken.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to jump in just yet because it sounds interesting, so interesting as it is. Ken, keep on going.
Yeah, the American Revolution started in 1776, and in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed between what would become the United States and Great Britain. It basically ended the American Revolution and recognized the United States as an independent country, a sovereign nation from Great Britain. The Kickapoo were, after that point in time in 1783, they were faced with continued Western expansion by the United States. The Americans continued to advance west into the Kickapoo lands. which would be what is now the present day state of Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, those areas. Western expansion by the new United States continued to push that way. So the Kickapoo and the United States entered into a treaty in 1795. It was called the Treaty of Greenville. And that treaty basically established the Kickapoo and other tribes in what is now the old Northwest part of the United States relinquish millions of acres of land. So you get this, so the United States, by relinquishing those lands, the United States could add states, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, to the United States government as states of the United States. In return for that exchange of land, the Kickapoo were forced to go further west from the original Great Lakes area. And they were forced basically into Illinois. American expansion continued westward, and from that first treaty in 1795, the Kickapoo and the United States government would enter into 10 treaties. Basically what those treaties did, what they did was the Kickapoo would have to give up vast swaths of land in exchange for small pieces of land further west. Kickapoo entered into a treaty called the Treaty of Edwardsville in 1822, and in that treaty, the Kickapoo basically gave up the state of Missouri and entered into another treaty, and that treaty was the Treaty of Castor Hill in 1832. That treaty brought the Kickapoo into what is now the state of Kansas, or the northeast corner of Kansas. And in that particular location today, you have the Kansas Kickapoo located there in the Horton area of that part of Kansas.
Kent, I want to ask you about treaties. What is a treaty? Why did the government bring that word to this world? And what is a treaty? And did they do treaties with the Kickapoo tribe?
Well, yes, they did numerous treaties, 10 treaties total over from a period of 1795 to 1854. A treaty is like a contract or a promise. It's an agreement between governments. And the Kickapoo were treated as a government, a Native American government. They were treated as a government, and of course the United States was a government at that time. And treaties are what governments enter into to avoid issues, or it could be anywhere from to end wars, to do trade, to do numerous things. Treaties are agreements between basically governments. And the treaties are important because for the Kickapoo, the treaties were important because they had to give up large areas of land, sometimes as much as 17 million acres, in order to basically survive. And to do that, they entered into this treaty with the United States to move further to the west for smaller tracts of land. And they eventually will end up in what is now the state of Kansas, in the northeast corner of the state of Kansas.
Oh, wow.
So they had to do that basically as a form of survival, because the treaties were often would end military campaigns or disputes. And that's how you enter into a treaty to get that. You got to remember that the United States was expanding further westward and encroaching on the lands of the Kickapoo. And that's why they wanted the Kickapoo to give up those lands, so they could basically take those lands or rights to those lands away from them.
And that is how you get the Kickapoo tribe of Kansas.
Estás escuchando Radio Kickapoo desde Musquis, Coahuila.